Welcome, Vigorous Ones, to another edition of Vigorously with me, your girl, Val Kleinhands. We need to do an official wrap-up of what was an incredible year in music that taught us so much. And of course, that is the year 2025. It was a wild year, especially politically. If you're an American, we saw some things. But what I wanted to get to more so was what we were doing when it comes to music. That's where my heart is. That's what I like chatting about. And that's why you're here. So let's get into it. This is 2025, the year music stopped performing. And I mean that for the better. I mean that in a much, much more positive way than it sounds. Let me get to it. What inspired this episode really was just, we're dangerously close to 2026. A recap feels appropriate. It feels timely. And I was kind of low-key inspired by Nick Nocturnal and the Nick Nocturnal Awards. I think he's a great content creator. He always puts a nice little bow on the year at the end of the year in heavy music with that event, the Nick Nocturnal Awards. And I just loved his transparency this year. About taking a break and what it feels like to reach a point where you think you need one, what it's like to come out of it after, and what it's like to rejoin content creation again. I just loved his transparency this year and the fact that he was able to put another award show off, pull another one off is what I mean, while he's dealing with that. So commendable. Very commendable, admirable. That's really why I decided to put a nice little bow on the year in music with this episode as well. So generally, in 2025, the year in music, it felt, I think, like a reset year in a lot of ways for a few reasons. Firstly, I noticed that a lot of artists were speaking out about reclaiming their intention with their being and their music. They're reclaiming their intention. They're being specific about their intention. They're being direct about the delivery of it. Less fast content, right? More slow burn albums, okay? More meaningful releases, more thought to the promotion behind those releases. Let's look at Cardi B's Am I the Drama? Oh, yes, let's look at that. This woman is in the streets. Going back to, I have fallen in love with her since Love and Hip Hop. So I have been following her since then. And if you're somebody who's just as familiar, you know that she got her start in New York. So to do the promo there out in the streets was incredible. Also to reach us with promotion, coming from the perspective of a mom, she did that a couple times. I got kids, but I had to make this album and I made this album for you. Like just that kind of vibe. Like, oh, I'm trying to tell these kids I'm making this album. Like just hilarious and real. I love it. She put intention behind how she promoted the album. Yes, she did the usual press circuit as well, but there's releases on the street, there's special videos, short clips that are just funny that absolutely play to her personality and who we know and love her to be, right? And we've watched her evolve as a person too, because now she's got additional perspectives on life and she's keying into those while she's promoting Am I the Drama, which is a fabulous album, by the way, and we will get into that. Let's look at Taylor's Life of a Showgirl, okay? That promotion. The most authentic thing in the world would have been to launch that on New Heights. Travis and Jason Kelsey's podcast. Come on now. She doesn't do things without impact, okay? She's, say what you want about her. And her business practices, and we'll dive into all that too this episode. But for real, what better opportunity do you have than an already successful podcast? Not to mention the lore behind the fact that this would be her first podcast appearance ever. It's true to her because she's with Travis. So who else's podcast would she go on? Duh. There's so much about that made sense to me, which kicked off the hype. I mean, really. And both Cardi, and let me rephrase this. I think when you look at both albums and how they each promoted those albums respectively, I think Cardi put a little bit more literal time. I think there was a larger span of time for her, just my perspective, that went into the promotion of Am I the Drama. Taylor, I think a little bit less. I recall a lot of it kicking off within the same week. And we had from August until that very first week in October to prepare and get the message out there, right? Cardi, kind of the same. I don't know why, but I feel like I started hearing about her album came out in, what was it, October, if I'm not mistaken. And I felt like I started hearing about it over the summer. So it's different methods, but both effective, both very effective. And heavy music, let's talk about my wheelhouse for a minute. Heavy music is catching up in this regard. I am noticing this shift more so now than a year ago, 2 years ago. A great example of heavy music kind of mimicking the same thing is the announcements and the promo for the Amon Amarth and Death Clock tour that we're going to be blessed with next year. Stoked for that tour. And Castle Rat is joining that as well. They're a great band if you don't know them. Definitely nostalgic, definitely for the gamers, definitely leaning a little bit power and stoner, and they run the gamut with their sound. So please enjoy Castle Rat if you have not heard them yet. Highly recommend, 10 out of 10. But we're talking about the promo, right? So Amon Amarth Death Clock tour with Castle Rat, that was announced in a way that fans were going to love, and it was a way that was going to get some attention, and it was done in a way that gave us enough time to get prepared for the tour that is coming next year. Like, I think it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we saw the clips of the guys in Death Clock having Johan on screen in their meeting room. Like, it was done well. It was done, obviously, to capture the heart of fans that are going to love this tour. It was a love letter to them, and it was done really, really well. So commendable on that. They had intention in mind, is my point. They knew who they were talking to. They knew who their audience was when they started to put those teaser clips out there. Let's talk about the way Rush promoted their upcoming tour, right? Getty, Alex, they knew there was going to be a lot of questions after the passing of Neil. They knew there would be some questions when a tour announcement came. It's like, whoa, it's just you two, and you two still want to go out? They knew that. But here's what they did. They put out a video that is, in my opinion, authentic to them and works for the fans, works for the fan base as well. This was a very simple video promoting that tour that depicted a conversation between Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee. Very simple, where the two of them sit down in a studio, they're BSing like friends, and you get that vibe. I mean, for crying out loud, I think they've been best friends for 60 years now, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, it should look like that, and it did. It should look like they were that comfortable with each other. It should look like they were just able to have a conversation in the studio. And within that conversation, let's not forget that they addressed a lot of the questions that fans would have about that return directly. Namely, who is going to take over drums and why choose them? I just feel like, I don't know, traditionally, when it comes to heavier music, hard rock, heavy metal, traditionally, it has been and continues to be more direct. So the promo for those releases and tour announcements, things like that, they seem to be a lot more to the point with less direction behind it, less like direction in the sense of production is what I mean. Less production, less frills, right? The direction is pointed, but there's less production behind it, less frills, things like that. It seems to me that that's kind of the MO there, but that is shifting. Like, for a minute, I think we had to correct course. For a minute, I feel like social media was God, not just for heavy music, but for any artist. And 2025 to me felt like a year where we're finally challenging that. We're finally seeing that shift a little bit. It feels like people want a connection again, not just background noise. It kind of felt like artists stopped asking, will this trend? And they started asking, does this feel like me? And we love that. We love that as fans. And I'm sure the artists have to feel a huge burden lifted coming at their projects from that direction with that in mind. So kudos to them. I'm glad we're seeing it. I think they understand that they're tired, Grandpa. They are tired. And so are the fans, because to constantly put something out is exhausting to keep up with as well. We're all human. And it's nice that we got a reminder of that this year. The internet didn't control the narrative as much, is really what I'm getting at. Artists made it work for them, which is the way it should have been the whole time. But now we're starting to get that through our heads. TikTok moments, of course, I mean, they still existed and they still exist today, but they don't necessarily, I don't know that they necessarily define success anymore. It's the icing on the cake. It's the cherry on top. It's a bonus in addition to what you're already doing at your core. The project itself still has to be interesting, and it still has to have some impact, and it still has to be what matters. And we're going to learn that a little bit later in this episode too. I'm going to prove as to why. But we got some other reminders too. Albums started to matter more than singles. Saw big news about full album releases this year, instead of just singles coming out, feeding the beast, we'll call it, right? That was a nice breath of fresh air, because I grew up on that mentality when I was consuming music as a kid and as a teenager and early adulthood. Like that, I was excited about the fact that there were big deals and big to-dos put out there over album releases. I feel like for the last 5 years or so specifically, right? A little bit, well, you know what? Maybe even 10. We'll say 10. I feel like for the last 10 years, and part of that includes my time in radio, so I was able to see this reflected mainstream as well. There was such a focus on get everybody instantly and get everybody quickly. And I think that's why there was such a push. I don't know, I'm not an artist, but my assumption is that this is why we were seeing with that period of time, we were seeing a lot of focus on singles. Just get it out there and get it out there quickly. Give the internet something to be fed with. For the previous 10 years, I think we were kind of in that era. And it is such a breath of air that's starting to change, I think. Artists with longevity won. Okay, not just visibility. The ones that are proven in their careers, they had a really successful year. Going viral wasn't the goal, not at all. Going honest was in music this year. Up and coming artists and artists that are still growing their following and still finding their sound in some ways too. I am hoping that this call for connection and intention means that they get to breathe a little bit when it comes to feeling forced to be online all the time. Those artists that, I've spoken to some of them on this show, they're exhausted by keeping up with that. And I hope that this is good news for them. I can't imagine it wouldn't be. I hope that they can put their effort into the place that it really matters, and that is the music. And their live shows, which are still, to me, arguably just as important. And I think Spirit Box and Lorna Shore, some live, shows that I saw this year, got that memo, and they're gonna continue that, which is a good sign. I think for a while, just the order of prioritization for an artist became social media, music, live shows, and then everything else. And hopefully that order is finally changing. I think we're now coming out of a 10-year period where we were doing that. Not so much anymore. That started to change this year. Connection was truly something that was exchanged between artists and fans, for better or for worse. Here's what I mean. I don't think that this is exclusively, let me be really clear, I do not think that this is exclusively a 2025 thing, but we did notice music consumption felt a lot more personal, and traditionally it has been a very personal thing, but I'm talking to the point where sometimes artists are having to check fans and say, hey, don't dox me. Hi, Sleep Token. I'm sorry you dealt with that this year. And just had to plead for some bodily autonomy. Like, we're still finding a balance there. Sleep Token to me was very smart in turning their feelings about that subject and their own fan base into a successful single in Caramel and successful album, even in Arcadia. It's huge. And that sparked a lot of communication between the two entities, between the band and the fans. And anytime you're doing that, anytime there's a line of communication open, for better or worse, it is furthering a connection. So they were smart to use their music as a way to have a conversation with those fans and kind of get a message across to those fans who were doing the most. Social media does continue to shape what connection looks like. It is still a viable tool for artists. We have to think a little bit more carefully about how we use it, but, and I think that's just traditionally because it doesn't feel this way, but to me, social media really is only 20 years old. It's still new. The way that we're using it is constantly changing. But it is still very much a viable tool to get a message across, especially if you're somebody that doesn't have a budget. It's the easiest free way to, all you need is a cell phone account. All you need is to be hooked up to one of the carriers, and ta-da, you can use social media. So it makes sense to use it. I think we're going to continue to use it, but we're going to think twice about how we use it, which is good. Loyalty is still currency. We learned that. Okay, Swifties, hello. We learned them. Still fiercely loyal. And they continue to contribute to Taylor's longevity. Not just her success, her longevity. They also checked her this year. We're going to get deep now. They checked her on a lack of evolution, which we're going to get into in her sound. Because I think they were hoping to see something different, something new, something fresh on the life of a showgirl. And that didn't really happen. So there was some question to that. They also questioned her business practices specifically when it came to how her vinyls are sold. There was a lot of chatter about that, rightfully so. And some even called on her to be more vocal politically because she has a platform. And I get it. During what was a super aggressive and challenging year politically in the US anyway, I think some of her fans expected her to make louder and better use of her platform, which she did not. So ultimately, even though there were some potential disappointments, you'd have to ask somebody who's a bigger Swiftie than I am to talk about the impact of those things. But I'm going to leave it at this. Ultimately, she is still banking on connections that she has built over the last 20 years. She started building this empire 20 years ago. And she did it by constant communication with those fans, by personalization for those fans in those little Easter eggs that she's famous for with her music videos, her lyrics and social media posts. Those are messages to her fans. Those are constant ways to stay in touch with those fans. And she's done that for 20 years now. That is admirable. That is admirable to hold on to something that long. And she has. Now, for her to be continually successful, if somebody asked me, I would recommend thinking about doing something new, something different musically, and maybe not such a push on the variety of vinyls anymore. I might change those two things. I think that would help. Just my opinion. But are people going to stop listening to Taylor Swift? No. No, she has earned her audience at this point. So she's still going. I think to that point, artists and fans alike did embrace evolution this year. Arguable in Taylor's case, but we did learn that some fans almost require growth in their artists. I'm talking about genre blending. I'm talking about tone and sound switch ups and intentional choices and intentional decisions within those realms. Spirit Box is a fabulous example of this. Lyrically, you could argue that Tsunami Sea was a peek into Courtney's journal. And the shift in sound, where appropriate, allowed for that to come to fruition. It was like it could have brought those journal pages to life. And that, I think, is what helped fans buy into it and believe it. Perfect Soul is, to me, probably the best example of this, because it is a banger that has heavy moments, but it slows down when it needs to with some super emo lyrics. I am not surprised that, and probably because Courtney, if I'm not mistaken, I think she's pretty close to my age. We all grew up on the emo stuff, and she's now doing her version of that as an artist, and that's now reaching a younger fan base who is also feeling those same things. In addition to throwing enough nods in there for her own age groups. And it's not all Courtney doing this, of course. I know that, but she's just the face of it. She has a huge part in how Spirit Box functions musically, but I mean, the team ultimately has to agree. So perhaps maybe she brings an idea to the table. Everybody else agrees. They get it. I get that impression. I get the impression that that's what's possibly happening behind closed doors, and it's working. Sabrina Carpenter and Taylor Swift, I mentioned this a little bit ago, but we'll get into Sabrina a little bit more now. Both of them were criticized for not evolving musically on their albums this year. There was some question as to why we didn't get that. This is Sabrina, for Man's Best Friend was Sabrina Carpenter's second full album that was released, if I'm not mistaken, or at least in the era that we know her to be Sabrina Carpenter now. Okay. So it's interesting that fans wanted evolution this quickly, but they seem to. Some fans did. At least that's what I was observing. Taylor has evolved before. 1989, woo, that was a big deal because it was like, whoa, no one had done a genre switch up like that before. Well, at least not an artist that had as big of a platform as Taylor did even then, even in 2014. So I wonder if some of her fans, because there was a switch up then, I wonder if maybe the expectation has been set that she will continually do this. I don't know. We're going to have to see where that goes. But both of them were criticized for not evolving musically on their albums this year. 2025 rewarded artists who changed their sound unapologetically. Genre blending wasn't just a gimmick. It was something that it did feel natural, and it was almost a requirement if fans felt like it was authentic to the artist. Somebody like Post Malone, we'll cite him as an example. If you know his background, if you know his roots, if you know where he comes from in the US, I mean, a lot of fans were like, oh, cool. We're happy to see a little bit of country. We're happy to see Post Malone in his country era now, because we would expect somebody with his background, somebody coming from Texas to have a little bit of country in him. So cool. Let's see that side of you now. Like, we've done the hip hop thing. Now you're starting to blend both. We love it. He was successful too. I think fans just in general, most fans seemed more open to growth than ever before. And that is a blessing for artists. It's a blessing for music, because that means music as a whole starts to evolve. And that's when we start to see these gems, and we start to see these names that we still remember decades from now. Let's talk a little bit about the use of video in live shows too. It has existed for decades, obviously. I'm not talking about that so much, but in 2025 and beyond, in my opinion, we're including video almost every time in these live shows, and we're working with that medium in ways that allow for functional production. It's amazing. The importance of video and the inclusion of it in live shows is parallel to what we're seeing on social media too. Video is still top dog right now when it comes to social media. That's reflected in our live shows. And I'm happy to see artists, at least with my own eyes, I watch Spirit Box do this. I watched Lorna Shore do this. They made great use of video as part of the production of their live shows. So much so that it was obviously thought out. It was obviously intentional, because it didn't take away from the performers, the band themselves. It was something that was in addition to. It was just part of the environment. It didn't take over. I think artists are starting to come up with creative ways to do that now, and that's a win for fans. And I think it's a win for artists too. Nostalgia always wins, okay? We had a lot of nostalgic moments in 2025 when it comes to music. New metal textures resurfacing without the irony. Artists being thoughtful about honoring their influences instead of outright copying them. Cardi B, I'm going to cite Am I to the Drama again. Those musical nods to Janet Jackson, Four Non Blondes. I mean, shout outs. With intention. It made sense because Cardi wasn't just copying what they did. She's writing her own words. These are her own thoughts. However, it helps to have those nods to anybody that has impacted you from the past. It just somehow brings a humanity to the whole project. I believe young Cardi is sitting in her, apartment in the Bronx, listening to Janet and Four Non Blondes as she's growing up. I believe that. And now she's sort of honoring them by bringing those bits from them into her album this year. Amazing. I mean, you can even do it with marketing. Let's talk about Good Charlotte, okay? The re-release of the famous Maid hoodie and the special GC magazine as part of a collab with Alternative Press to celebrate Motel Ducap. Now, yes, they were promoting a brand new album, but this was also a nice little nod to the audience that has been with them for decades now, to say, we're still here and we remember you. Remember this? Hey, by the way, we have something new coming out. Like, genius. Like, Sabrina Carpenter got some chatter for her videos and her branding, still getting some attention because of the retro aesthetics to them, which are beautifully done. Kendrick Lamar's halftime show, let's take it back earlier this year to the halftime show. That was full of 90s West Coast hip hop nostalgia. Beautiful. Let's talk about just how the way that artists applied nostalgia into their products didn't feel like, remember this? It felt a little bit more also like, sure, remember this, but thank you for shaping me. Thank you for being part of this. Here's the next chapter. Like, again, in Good Charlotte's case, the promo for Motel Ducap, the album itself felt like a very specific thank you to fans, recognizing that a lot of us have written for them for 25 years now. Maid hoodie sealed that for me. Just love seeing it. Hillary Duff returning. Okay, we can't not talk about Hillary. that scored a lot of praise, and her return to music was welcomed with open arms, and the return was definitely cemented. Like, okay, let's pay attention. Just by releasing a new single last month and beginning the promotion for the upcoming album, the tour, everybody's excited about. I cannot wait for that. It was a refreshing year in music. It was a reset year in music, and I think we've only got more to come. I think 2025 in music is going to be remembered fondly because it was a year of realignment. It was a year just that had an encouraging nudge toward reinvention. Music felt like a companion again, not content. And it reminded us why we fell in love with music in the first place. So, fabulous year, done well. We learned a lot from it. I can't wait to see what we've got in 2026, and I will be with you the entire way as more things come our way. So thank you for joining me this episode. Check in again on Wednesday. That's when we've got our next one. Bye.